Hi everyone, I hope you're having a lovely day. In the last episode, we shared James's very first gentle Noel with Diep and little Nye. One small string of lights, a paper star in the window, simple thank you cards, and a key that finally felt like home. Today, we'll explore how that tiny glow quietly spreads to neighbors, to old memories, and to James's first shy steps toward a new purpose. If this warm, peaceful story touches you, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next episodes. The box is small enough that it leaves a little square of dust on the chair when Diep lifts it, and for some reason, that makes her smile even before she sees what's inside. Someone, probably Nye with her serious little hands, has written Noel on the lid in bright marker, the letters wobbling like they're trying to dance, and tucked the flap under with great care. James stands in the doorway, still a little rumpled from sleep, watching as Diep opens it. The morning light coming in from the window catches the first thing they see: a short string of lights. The cheap kind you buy years ago and keep promising to use next time, and a paper star carefully cut from the back of an old cereal box, painted gold and sprinkled with what looks suspiciously like flour and a little sugar to make it sparkle. On top of everything sits a folded note. For our first Noel with Uncle James, we can start small. Love, Nye. Diep reads it aloud, her voice soft, and then glances up, her eyes warm. She must have dug this out after you went to bed, she says. My mother would call this a good kind of mischief. James takes the note like it's something fragile. First Noel, he repeats, and there's a kind of wonder in the way he says it, like someone testing a word they were never sure belonged to them. His memories of holidays are of stiff company parties, polished glasses, and the feeling of shivering in a suit outside a big glass building while cameras flashed. Not of tiny paper stars and boxes on kitchen chairs. For a moment, he doesn't know what to do with any of it. Diep seems to sense the hesitation. She sets the box on the table, next to the slim folder they've been building. Room rent, health care, emergency, contact, and smiles. We don't have to turn the whole place into a movie scene, she says. My mom was a single mom, and when money was tight, she'd say, we may not have a tree, but we have a table, and we have each other. That's enough for a holiday. We can start where she did. She pulls out one of the simple papers, and on the back draws a quick little plan. A star in the window, the lights around the kitchen shelf, maybe a small space on the table for a candle if they can find one. No budget meetings, she adds lightly. Just seeing what we already have. It's a keys and papers moment, but instead of legal forms and contracts, it's a homemade map for spreading a little warmth in a small apartment. Nye appears, hair still messy from sleep, clutching her pillow. Did you see? She asks, bouncing on her toes. I found the lights in the drawer with the old birthday candles. They still work, I think. The paper star is from the cereal you like, Uncle James, because it means you are already inside Noel. She says it with the logic only children have, and maybe some of the grandmothers listening would nod. Because haven't we all kept something simple from a package and turned it into a bit of decoration, just to make a day feel special? They test the light string by plugging it into the only free outlet near the counter. At first, nothing happens, and James feels a strange pang of disappointment. Silly, but real. Then, after a small tap from Diep's fingers and a gentle twist at the first bulb, they blink on in a sudden, soft glow, not perfect, a few spaces dark where bulbs are missing, but cheerful enough that Nye actually claps. See, Diep murmurs, we can start small and still be bright. The first everyday obstacle shows up when they try to hang the lights. The The string is shorter than Nia's drawing made it look, and no matter how James stretches from the chair and Diep holds the other end up by the shelf, it simply won't make the full loop they imagined. For a second, there's a little crest of frustration. He's always been the one to make things reach, to fix, to stretch, and it bothers him more than he wants to admit that even a string of lights won't go as far as he wants. But instead of letting that feeling sour the morning, Diep laughs gently. "They're telling us where they want to live," she says. Maybe they're more of a corner string than a full circle string. She shifts the chair, rethinks the path, and together they find a new route. Up the side of the cupboard, across the small spice shelf, and down around the little calendar where they mark clinic days and school events. When they step back, the effect is simple and sweet, like the glow you get from a stove left on low, and suddenly that corner of the kitchen looks like it's telling its own story. "My mother used to do this with old red yarn," Diep remembers aloud. "She'd string it along the wall and clip our drawings and wishes to it with wooden clothespins. No lights, but it felt like the whole room was listening to what we hoped for." It's a single mom memory that settles over the scene like a blessing, and James finds himself picturing it. A younger Diep, smaller and perhaps a little shy, carefully hanging a crooked paper ornament on a line, her mother humming as she stirred a pot of soup. "What did you wish for?" he asks, half curious, half amazed at how much this simple decorating is stirring up inside him. She thinks for a moment, biting her lip. "Some years, just that the rent would be paid on time," she admits. "Other years, that my mom wouldn't get so tired. And when I was older, I wished we'd have one holiday where she didn't have to pretend she wasn't sad." She looks at him squarely, kind but direct. "What about you? What did you wish for at fancy parties?" He considers his answer. "Sometimes I wished someone would tell me it was okay to go home early," he says finally. "Other times, that my father would look at me the way he looked at a deal he'd just closed, with approval, not calculation. But I don't think I ever wished for a string of lights over a spice shelf." They share a small smile, and you can almost feel the older women watching, thinking how often we only realize later in life that the things we truly needed were smaller than we were taught to chase. They hang the paper star in the window with a bit of tape and an old ribbon Nye found in a drawer, the tip just low enough for her to touch. "Now, when you look from outside," she says, "you'll know which window is ours. It's the one that says, 'We are home.'" It's a quiet promise to be visible in a way that's gentle, not loud. Home routines fold themselves around this decorating, as they always do. While the lights warm up, Diep turns to the small pot of rice she put on earlier. She stirs in a handful of leftover vegetables and a bit of egg, turning it into a kind of Noel fried rice, special, only because she drizzles a few drops of soy sauce in the pan to make it smell richer. James slices a single apple into careful wedges, placing them on a plate like a fan, and jokes that this might be the simplest holiday breakfast in the city. But somehow, with the lights flickering and the star in the window, it feels like a quiet feast. They eat at the table, not rushing, and Nye declares that on Noel days, whether they are big or small, everyone has to say one wish for someone else, not for themselves. "I wish," she says, "that Uncle James's heart doesn't hurt when he hears bad words from the past, and that he can hear the good words more." She says it so plainly that James has to set down his spoon for a moment. "I wish," Diep adds thoughtfully, "that this home can become a place people are not afraid to walk into, even if they had hard fathers or lonely years. And I wish our neighbors will feel some of this light too, even if they don't have a box labeled Noel." James, still getting used to saying tender things out loud, clears his throat. I wish, he manages, that this is not just my first Noel here, but the first of many, and that I learn to bring some warmth, not just receive it. It's an intent more than a promise, but as the words join the air, they feel like a small lantern being lit and placed on a shelf somewhere inside him. Later, when breakfast plates are stacked and the first laundry of the day is spinning in the little washer that rattles more than it should, neighbor kindness knocks quietly in the form of Ms. Hoa with a small bag in her hand. I saw the star, she says, peering past them with a smile. So I thought these could come out of my cupboard. They've been sleeping too long. She opens the bag to reveal 3 small cloth ornaments. Their colors faded but still pretty. A little red heart, a green bird, and a white circle with silver stitching. My children sent them from overseas years ago, she explains, but they don't visit at Noel anymore, and my hands shake too much to hang them straight. Maybe your Enhai can help. It's one of those moments where the line between giving and receiving blurs. Diep insists on making tea for her, and they sit together for a few minutes while Nai carefully threads bits of string through the ornaments and hangs them under the light string, her tongue peeking out in concentration. James watches the scene, feeling something loosen in his chest. This is the opposite of the holiday gatherings he grew up with, where gifts were impressive but eyes were elsewhere. Here, the gift is simple, and the giver gets to see exactly how loved it becomes. The everyday obstacle of the day creeps in around midday, when James remembers an envelope he hasn't opened yet, one that came from the bank days ago, still tucked in his bag. For a moment, the old tightness tries to return. Envelopes with official logos have rarely brought him anything but anxiety. He sits at the table, the Noel lights now off in the bright daylight but still framing the space, and turns it over in his hands. You don't have to open it alone, Diep says quietly, placing a glass of water next to him. It's a small echo of Nai's note. Remember to drink water, and also a gentle reminder of their new rule. Papers can be read at the table, together. He nods, unfolds it carefully, and reads. It's not as bad as his mind had painted it at 3 a.m. A final statement, a note about closing an old account, words about remaining balance that are smaller than he hoped, but not nothing. They go through it line by line, Diep's finger moving along the page, simplifying phrases in the way she did for their neighbor's gas notice. When it's done, she looks at him. We can add this to the folder under room rent, she suggests. Not because rent is their business, but because it's part of what you're carrying. If we know exactly what you have, we can make honest plans. Her practicality is steadying. There's no pity in it, just respect. Together they fold the paper and tuck it behind the tab, and instead of feeling like another weight, it feels like a piece of a puzzle that someone has finally helped him set down in the right place. As the afternoon stretches, they drift into small occupations that match the calm mood of the day. Nai draws new stars to tape on the wall around the window, discovering you can get different yellows depending on how hard you press the crayon. Diep peels vegetables for a simple soup that will be their evening meal, humming a carol her mother used to sing off-key, but with great enthusiasm. James takes a clean page from the folder and starts scribbling ideas for work that fits this new reality. Nothing grand, just thoughts like help neighbors with forms for small fee, translate official letters at the clinic, set up niche online for simple home-cooked meals. The word niche makes him chuckle. Once it used to mean a market segment and a presentation slide, now it might mean the thing we do well in this building. He's nowhere near decisions yet, But the act of writing these options down feels like lighting another tiny strand of lights, this time inside his mind. As the sun dips and they switch the Noel lights on again, the kitchen seems to gather itself in a soft glow. Star in the window, cloth ornaments from a neighbor, paper stars from a child, a folder of papers that don't feel quite as scary anymore, soup on the stove, and 3 people who, a short time ago, didn't know for sure if they would be sitting at the same table. The day has held its share of worries and small stumbles, but each found its gentle resolution. A too short string of lights found its rightful corner. A bank envelope found a place in a folder instead of under a bed. A neighbor's loneliness found a bit of company in a cup of tea and a child's careful hands. As they sit down for dinner, the steam from the soup curling up into the twinkling lights, it's easy to sense that this first Noel is not about perfection or erasing the hard things that came before. It's about letting a single string of lights, 1 paper star, and a few honest pages on a table say, "We're still here, and we're still willing to begin." And somewhere between spoonfuls and shared smiles, the next step hints at itself. Maybe tomorrow they'll carry a bit of this warmth out into the hallway, or down the stairs, or across town to someone else who needs a small star in their window. And in that simple thought, the story keeps quietly opening its hands to what comes next. After dinner, they don't rush to clear the table. Instead, the 3 of them linger in the soft glow of the little Noel corner they've created, talking about nothing important and everything that matters. The way families often do when the day has been long but kind. And for a while they just sit with their hands around warm bowls, listening to the tiny clicks of the lights as they heat up. The hallway outside is quieter than usual. It's that time of evening when most people are watching television or washing dishes. The clatter and voices muffled behind closed doors. Nai, who has been watching the paper star in the window as if it might wink back at her, suddenly says, "Do you think anyone can see our star from the stairs?" The question hangs there, simple but full of meaning, because to her, a star in the window is like a small sign that says, "You're welcome to knock. There are people inside." James stands and walks to the window, peering out into the dim stairwell. "From the 3rd step," he replies, "you can see it perfectly. From the 2nd, just the edge. From the 1st, maybe just the glow." He glances back at Diep. "Do we want people to see it?" She smiles. "We lived through years of trying not to be noticed," she says. "Especially my mother and I, when money was thin and we didn't want to attract questions. But a star is a gentle kind of being seen. I think we can be brave enough for that." She doesn't say it like a grand speech, more like a quiet acceptance that they are allowed to occupy space. You might find yourself thinking about your own windows and whether you've ever felt the urge to pull the curtains tight, or instead, to let a little light spill out. As they begin to clear the table, stacking bowls and wiping crumbs into a small pile, the power flickers. It's the second everyday obstacle of the day, but this one feels bigger for a moment because the apartment blinks from warm to dark in a heartbeat. And for a man who has been thrown back into shadows by harsh words and sudden changes, that can be jarring. Nai gasps, but before fear can build, Diep's voice comes, steady and calm in the dark. "Stay where you are," she says gently. "The lights will tell us what's wrong." It's such a simple sentence, but it has the effect of a hand reaching out in the dark. They listen. Down the hall, someone mutters, a television clicks off, a door opens and closes. Then, just as quickly as they went out, the lights return. First the overhead bulb, then the string of Noel lights, blinking back to life as if nothing happened. "Old building," Diep sighs with affection more than annoyance. My mom used to say the wires get grumpy in winter. They need a moment to remember their job. She laughs quietly, and in that laugh, James hears how she has learned to tell herself small stories that make inconveniences feel less threatening. When I was little, she adds, whenever the lights flickered, she'd light a candle even if they came back on right away. Just in case, she'd say, and we'd pretend it was on purpose, like a special evening. She opens a drawer and pulls out a short candle in a cloudy glass, one of the few things she kept from those days. Seems like a good night for it, she murmurs, striking a match. The candle's flame adds another layer to the room's softness, a reminder that even in unexpected darkness, there are small ways to keep a glow. They settle back around the table with cups of hot water. Good for digestion, as Diep's mother always insisted, and the talk turns to memories of holidays past. Nai wants to hear stories of when you were my size, so Diep tells her about one year when her mother couldn't afford any decorations at all and instead drew a big tree on the wall with green chalk, hanging wishes on it with tape, and how they both laughed when the chalk smeared on her face and she went to the shop without noticing, leaving a trail of green fingerprints everywhere. Did people laugh at you? Nai asks. Some did, Diep admits, but some just wiped it off my cheek and said, "You must be helping your mother." Those were the people we remembered. James listens, sometimes smiling, sometimes quiet, and when Nai nudges him for his own story, he chooses one of the gentler ones. The year he learned how to tie a bow tie in secret, because his father always seemed irritated when he struggled with it. I practiced on chair legs when everyone was asleep, he says, and Nai giggles at the picture of a boy bending over furniture in the dark. So, in a way, he adds, my first successful bow tie was a kind of Noel star, but nobody noticed except me. You might feel, as you listen, that there are small memories in your own life that never got applause, yet were as important to you as any big achievement. The candle burns lower, the hallway hum quiets further, and eventually it's time for teeth, pajamas, and tucking in. In Nee's room, the paper heart with 3 figures now has a few more stars around it, taped up during the afternoon. Can we leave the door a little open? She asks as she settles under her blanket. So I can see the star in the window if I wake up. Diep nods. We'll leave it open just enough for the star to peek, she says. And remember, if you have a scary dream, you can call us. This is not a house where you have to be brave alone. It's a quiet promise, but it's one that many of you may have made to children or grandchildren, or perhaps wished someone had made to you. In his small room, James sits on the edge of his mattress with the faint light of the Noel string filtering through the wall. He reaches for the little notebook he started earlier and writes down a few words before sleep can wash them away. Noel lights, neighbor ornaments, candle, star, and window. Underneath, almost as an afterthought, he writes, first sprout, first wish for others. It may not look like much to anyone else, but to him it's a record of the day he began to associate holidays with safety instead of performance. He tucks the notebook back under his pillow, as if the thoughts will seep into his dreams from there, and falls asleep to the soft blur of distant street sounds and the faint, reassuring creak of his new home settling around him. The next morning, the Noel box is back on the chair, this time open, as if waiting for more. Over breakfast, simple again, slices of bread, a bit of jam, and strong tea for Diep and soft tea for James. They talk about what more could look like without spending much. We could make cards, Nai suggests, swinging her feet. One for Ms. Hoa, one for the landlord, one for the clinic people who help Grandma. She says Grandma, as if James's mother and Diep's late mother and the old neighbor are all cousins in the same big family tree. Diep nods. "We have paper, we have pens," she says. "My mom used to say, if you can't buy gifts, send words. They last longer anyway." It's another single mom memory that guides her hand as she pulls out a small stack of old envelopes and colored pens. They sit at the table, the three of them, and start turning plain rectangles into messages. Nye draws stars and onions with smiling faces for the clinic, so they know we are eating healthy, while Diep writes short, sincere lines. "Thank you for checking on our meter. Thank you for letting us pay a little later when times are hard. Thank you for remembering our names." James stares at a blank card for a long moment, then finally writes one addressed to his mother, even though he's not sure yet if he'll actually send it. "This year my Noel lights are small, but they are honest. I hope you can have some light too." He doesn't show it to anyone. He just places it in the room rent folder behind the papers, as if the table is now holding not only practical plans, but also unsent feelings, keeping them safe until he knows what to do with them. When they're done, Nye stacks the finished cards and suggests, maybe Uncle James can be the postman. It's a small joke, but also a way of giving him a role that isn't just the one who needed help. And he smiles as he tucks the cards into his jacket pocket. "I'll deliver them after lunch," he says. The everyday obstacle on this particular day arrives not from the building, but from inside James himself. As he walks down the stairs later with the cards in his pocket, he feels a sudden wave of shyness and doubt. For a man who spent so many years in roles where he was supposed to be impressive, it's oddly intimidating to knock on doors with nothing but simple thank yous in his hands. At Miss Hoa's door, his knuckles hover for a moment before he finally taps. She opens it with a surprised smile, apron already on for her own cooking, and he clears his throat awkwardly. "This is from us," he says, handing her the card. "From the apartment with the star." She reads it slowly, then looks up with eyes that are brighter than before. "People forget old women at Noel," she says. "But you three remember. That is better than any big present." At the landlord's door, he's not home, so James slides the card under the frame with a little stone to keep it from moving. At the clinic, he hesitates at the front desk, but the nurse he recognizes from earlier smiles and tapes the card to their bulletin board. "We'll put this where everyone can see," she says. "Sometimes staff care more about kind words than gifts, you know." As he walks back, the weight of the cards in his pocket has shifted, from heavy to light, from burden to blessing. And you might feel in your own chest how doing something small for others can sometimes lift your own worries a bit without you even noticing. Back at the apartment, the star in the window winks at him as he climbs the stairs, and the key feels natural in his hand as he turns it. Inside, the soup pot is already on the stove. Nye is making little paper chains to hang under the shelf, and Diep is on the phone with her sister, laughing at something, her voice warmer than it's been in a long time. When she hangs up, she shares the news. Her sister is thinking of visiting after the new year, bringing some old recipes from their mother's notebook. "We might have to squeeze a bit," she says, looking at their small space. But she said she doesn't need a bed, just a corner near the onions. It's a gentle foreshadowing of more family, more stories, more chances for this small home to stretch without breaking. That evening, as they sit down for another simple meal under the Noel lights, bread dipped in soup, a shared orange cut into segments. Nothing fancy, but somehow festive. Diep suggests something new for their gratitude habit. "Tonight," she says, "let's each say something we're looking forward to. not just something from today. My mom always said hope is like a light. You hang a little bit ahead of you, so you have a reason to walk toward it. Nye goes first. She's looking forward to seeing if the onion will be tall enough to tie a bow around by next week. James is surprised to hear himself say he's looking forward to trying a new kind of work, maybe helping people with papers and small things that matter, even if he's not ready to call it a job yet. And Diep says she's looking forward to the day when she doesn't immediately tighten her stomach at the sight of an official envelope, because she'll know they have enough systems and enough support to handle whatever it contains. These aren't flashy hopes, but they are the kind that keep a person getting out of bed every morning. As the day draws to a close, the camera of your mind's eye might pull back a little. The tiny apartment, the single Noel string, the paper star, the jars of onions, the folder of papers, the key on its hook, the neighbors with cards on their tables, and in the center of it all, 3 people who, not so long ago, might have thought their stories were heading in very different, lonelier directions. Now they are sitting shoulder to shoulder, sharing soup and stories and silence with equal ease. And the first Noel that began with a cereal box star and a shy note has unfolded into something deeper. A gentle practice of turning simple days into safe days. Somewhere beyond, of course, larger questions still wait. What kind of steady work might suit this new version of James? How far this little paper and tea niche of Diep's might reach? Whether they'll be brave enough to visit certain people in person, Noel card in hand. But those are steps for another episode. For tonight, the star in the window is enough. The lights on the shelf are enough. The soft chorus of good night drifting down the hallway is enough. And as the candle flickers low and they take turns blowing it out, you can almost hear the quiet thought settling in each of their hearts. The worst has been said to us, but we are still here, still setting tables, still making room for one more bright, ordinary tomorrow. In this gentle Noel episode, James wakes to find a small box labeled Noel from Nye, holding an old string of lights, a cereal box paper star, and a note. We can start small. Together with single girl Diep, they hang the short lights around the spice shelf, tape the star in the window, and remember Diep's single mom decorating with red yarn and chalk trees when money was tight. Neighbor Mrs. Hoa brings 3 faded cloth ornaments. The power flickers, and a candle turns the moment into cozy tradition. Simple meals, gratitude wishes, and a mislaid key all resolve softly. The next day, they handwrite thank you cards for neighbors, the landlord, the clinic, and even one unsent note to James's mother. Their first Noel becomes a quiet practice of turning small acts into shared warmth and new hope.